All right, super excited to be here today with one of my favorite saxophone players of all time. Bob Sheppard has played with a who's who of all genres of music, including Chick Corea, Freddie Hubbard, Mike and Randy Brecker, Mike Stern, Herbie Hancock, Kurt Elling, Lyle Mays, John Beasley steps ahead, and that's not even mentioning all of the pop and rock stars throughout the years. And of course, like many of my other videos, I've dropped in the video description a free PDF download. This one to some of my favorite 251 phrases from my new book, 200 251 Jazz Phrases. And you'll also find in the video description a link to my Next Level Sax community where we're doing weekly vocabulary PDFs, digital lessons, master classes, all within a supportive community. Once again, I am super excited to have Bob here because he's not only an incredible performer, he's also an incredible educator. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mr. Bob Sheppard.
Hi,
hey,
Jeff.
Hey,
nice
Bob.
To see you. Thank you for this beautiful invitation. Appreciate it. I believe you took maybe one lesson with me.
I took one lesson with you, and it totally changed the way in which I approach practicing ever since that lesson. Yeah.
You know, I one lesson, so I can't really take credit for anything that you've accomplished.
Well, that's all it takes, though. Sometimes, you know.
Well, I'm very grateful that I've been able to teach such talented saxophone players have come along, and it's always nice to hear. So.
Yeah. And Bob, is it possible to get a little more audio, a little bit more, little more volume?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Yeah, we'll just.
How's that?
There
Better?
it is. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay. And I'm sure we will get to. I know we will get to some of the stuff that definitely changed the way in which I approach practicing and playing in general. But before we get there, I want to talk a little bit about some of the early music inspirations and how you kind of got started. And then I definitely want to get to the majority of what we'll talk about is some of the saxophone-centric type of things like the gear, how to approach practicing, and a whole bunch of other things, I'm sure. So it'll be super fun. Okay, tell me, you grew up in Philadelphia, is that correct?
I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and that was at a time where there was really great school systems that had music programs and feeder programs, and I was really quite. I guess was lucky to be in an environment like that, where New York, Philadelphia, there was a lot of music going on, and my high school itself was. We had really great players in that high school that I, at the time, I just thought that's the way it was, right? That, man, I gotta be able to play with these guys, and then we had a great jazz band. We won some competitions, and every year we would have Whitty in, Maynard's band in, Kenton's band in. That was a highlight, and there was a culture of music happening when I grew up around Philadelphia, and a lot of opportunities to try to play. So my first gig, I think my first gig was in 10th grade, maybe 11th grade, where I don't know how I got the gig, but my dad had to drive me there. It was some bar up in New Hope, Pennsylvania, and my dad was sitting at the bar about 10 feet away, and then this guy with a Cordvox and a drummer, he just started playing tunes, and I would, desperately trying to hang on, and that was my first gig, and yeah, so Philly was a great place to grow up and be around music if you're into it. My dad was also a saxophone player. He did professional gigs, but he wouldn't call himself a great player, and he wouldn't teach me. He was a clarinet player, saxophone player. So, the music was in the house, right? Big thing, right? If you don't get that inspiration at a young age, then it probably won't happen as easy. And for me, there was music in the house. There were those Dixieland records that my dad had, and big band records, and there was jazz radio, and then there was school, and then there was all that camaraderie from guys that are trying to play, kind of like inspiring you to do it, and it was turned out to be a really really great environment to get inspiration and want to get better.
Right. Yeah, I had a similar situation. I grew up in a small town, one high school, and our high school one year had 32 all-state band members, and it was a public high school. I mean, we had just really incredible band directors. We had two while I was there, and they would do the same thing. They would set up festivals. They would get other schools involved, and so we would all get together and bring in guest artists and all of that. And it was just such a huge inspiration and just motivating each other.
Yeah, just like anything, the environment turns out that you grow up in, and the culture and the environment that you grow up in is a big deal. It's not impossible to become a musician out of nowhere, but uh, and I've actually met people that have done that. But usually it's around when you're younger, and you have it programmed in your ear, your head, your musical memory. It was basically programming your ear, right? So if the music is floating around in there, it seems like you can access it if you start to get good at your instrument.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's definitely an oral art form. When you kind of left Philadelphia eventually, I believe we're both alumni of the Eastman School of Music.
That's right. Eastman was probably the last thing on my mind. I My father was a musician, but he wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer because he wanted me to be able to take care of myself, right? And so I actually went to pre-med for semester, and I basically flunked out because I used to go home after school. I was at this school, a college called Rider College near Princeton, and have all this, biology, just normal. And I used to go home and play along with Train and Cannonball and Phil Woods, and I basically didn't do the homework, and so I said to myself, I'm going to go into music. So there was a period of time there, like 9 months, where I I didn't go to college. I didn't go to school. I transferred into a local community college, which was actually great. Uh, I had a great theory teacher and to get my grade point average up. But in the meantime, I was doing day gigs. I worked at Sears. I worked in I worked some road department, county road department stuff, and then also was trying to play gigs. I was in a wedding band. I was in a soul band. I was, and so I I had to just go through this period of like going, hey, I don't want to do this day gig stuff. I want to be a musician, and but at the same time, I was practicing a lot, and I was studying clarinet a lot. Not
Right.
saxophone was not so much. Sadly to say, I didn't study saxophone except for asking questions and hearing people are really good guys around my neighborhood, and but I didn't officially study. But I was studying clarinet. I was I was a kind of a serious clarinet player. I really thought maybe, hey, I could play classical orchestral clarinet, and I'm glad I did that. But so the idea of studying clarinet at school was my thing, and I went to Glassboro State College, which is now Rowan University, and for my Bachelor of Education, BS, Bachelor of Science in Education on the clarinet. and that's what I got my degree in. And but at that all through that time, I was playing saxophone. I was trying to learn how to play jazz, and I was working a lot, as a young player. I knew tunes. I could go out, play different styles. I was able to actually, I would say I was quasi-professional, maybe a professional. I don't know. I can't even remember, but I was able to sound good, and it was a lot of fun. And I said, man, this is what I want to do, right? And fortunately at Glassboro was a great program back then, and it probably still is. But a great arranger, composer, Manny Album. He was very well known, especially back in the '60s and '70s, and he was the guest artist there. He came in just about every week, and he took me under his wing, and he really liked my playing, and he said, and when it was time to graduate, he said, man, I think you should go to Eastman. There's a program there called Jazz and Contemporary Media, brand new. They never had jazz program at Eastman, and I had my girlfriend and I was doing gigs. And I don't know, man. I'm having fun, and I don't want to go. What am I going to go there for? But he really encouraged me, and it turned out, if I would be able to thank anyone in particular, Manny Album was the one who got me out of my little bubble in Philadelphia, and when I went to Eastman, like, everything changed. I started having to play at really high level, and meeting great musicians that turned out to be people that I still play with and work for, and that opened up all kinds of doors for me, just from a standpoint of those relationships. So that was a big thing about going somewhere else and then having to start anew, and meeting people that were eventually, like, really helpful to my just my entire arc of what my career. I had no idea what was going to happen, but I ended up going to New Orleans for a couple of years teaching, actually, at Loyola University, and I could have stayed there. That was great. Being in New Orleans, I was working a lot, and but I told myself, man, I'm going to move to New York. I was always going to move to New York. I was going to just be a New York musician, whatever that meant. And but at the time, all these players from Eastman, all my friends, they were migrating to LA, and especially this one friend of mine, John Seri, great, amazing composer and piano player and percussionist. He had a record deal, and hey man, I want you to do this record. Will you come out to LA and do it? And that was how without getting into the details, that's how I ended up in LA. I was never west of Harrisburg. I didn't know anything about LA or anything. So Eastman was really an important stepping stone for me.
And at what point then did you connect and take that step into the Freddie Hubbard gig?
Well, these questions come up over many years, like, how did I get to do that, and how did I get to do that, and those are interesting questions, because now in this world, you wouldn't be able to actually create that, right? But it's being in the right place at the right time, and then having what it needs. My friend Billy Childs, my dear friend Billy Childs, was playing with Freddie. I met Billy, and he heard me play, and then he was playing with Freddie. He goes, hey, I think Freddie might be wanting to change tenor players, and you should come down to this gig down in I don't know if you probably weren't around when they had this place called the Parisian Room down on Venice. And I said, oh man, okay, Freddie Hubbard, geez, I don't, so I went into this club very, very sheepishly, and next thing I know, I was on stage, and I played a couple tunes, and made it. I don't know what that means. Made it. I guess I didn't. I didn't. I wasn't kicked off the stage. Let's put it that way. And next thing you know, his manager called me for a gig, and then the next gig, and I don't think I was ever officially hired for that gig, but it went on for 7 or 8 years, on and off. It was never one band. Freddie had East Coast band and we just pick up bands, but yeah, that was quite something. If anyone ever asked me if what it was like to play with Freddie Hubbard, I would have never thought that would have happened in a million years. If I moved to New York, probably wouldn't have happened because there's a great tenor player on every block. But at the time in LA, I was sort of, I think there was a lot of always great players here, but there were more, sort of fusion, Grover Washington, Tom Scott, that kind of thing was going on here very heavily. There was a really cool jazz thing here, but from my age group, there was the thing was that kind of fusion funk jazz, and I almost thought, man, I'm never going to make it here. This is not my thing, But because of that, I was more of a, if you will, an East Coast post-train kind of a guy. That's the kind of language that I liked, and so Freddie kept calling me. So that and other gigs like that I had a chance to do. There was no let's just say it was product of when there was still a real meritocracy going on, right? If you could prove yourself and at the right time in the right place, you develop a reputation, and that leads to the next thing. It's like that, the tree with branches, And I've thought about it a lot because this question comes up a lot over time. Like, how'd you do that? How in the world did you do that? Like, how did you do all the studio work and still go out and play with Chick Corea and Steely Dan? I never thought about it for a second because they were just opportunities that came to me, and I treasure them, and I'm very grateful for all that stuff. But I never called anybody for a gig in my life. Literally, I never tried to get on a gig, ever, and not bragging in any way, but no one did, right? It was you just sort of proved yourself at the right moment, and then there are other things as well, if you're able to handle the scene, sort of read the terrain and kind of like, oh, I see what I have to do here. I'm going to step lightly here and step up there. There's a lot of unexplained things that you have to do as a musician, as to not just play well, but understand what's needed at the moment from a player, from a musical point of view, and from a personal point of view of reading people, like how they are, right? And I don't know how I learned how to do that actually, but it turns out that was a skill. And over time, I realized people that are really successful at what they do, they kind of have this kind of skill, able to navigate the situation. But growing up around Philly, I played every kind of music there is, right? So that was my schooling, doing gigs, because I was able to know the language, know the dialect of the language, and step in. Okay, that's what's needed, so I could supply that. This is what's needed here, and that's the arc of my career is about kind of giving what the music needs at the right time, right? And so I had a lot of hats I could wear, and I liked that. Some guys were, man, like, when I used to hang out with Bob Berg back in the day. Bob, now I'm a jazz musician, man. This is what I do. and I'm not going to do that shit, man. I'm gonna practice, and he drove cabs, right? He'd rather do that to make his rent than play weddings, right? And that's depends on the person, right? And man, do I respect that, right? But for me, it was all practice. If I had to do a Polish wedding or do like a bar mitzvah or a top 40 gig on top of the Marriott in Philly, right? It was okay, it's a gig. It'll be fun. And I could play, and I play jazz, right? Because everything is jazz to me, right? Everything. It's all a jazz gig. It's all ear training, trying to use your ear to fit in and play in tune and play the right style. And that was a beautiful challenge. I enjoyed that. So that kind of explains a lot about how I was able to do a lot of different things along the way. Because I had all that Rolodex of experiences that I could draw upon, and I never thought twice about it. I thought that's what it was to be a musician, and at the same time trying to be, a jazz player. Always, that was on the top of my criteria. Man, I got to be able to play. I want to play like these guys, like whether it be Brecker or Sonny Rollins or Jerry Gonzi or whatever. That was what I was trying to do, and that turned out like, oh yeah, all of a sudden I got a chance to play at a high level, and Freddie Hubbard, who would have thought, Jewish cat, white Jewish cat from Levittown, Pennsylvania, like playing with Freddie Hubbard, what? So there's a lot of those kind of gigs that I've done where people look at my resume and they go, well, how did you do all that? To play on the Johnny Carson show. How did I play with, Joni Mitchell? How did I, on and on and on. And I try to look at that now and go, yeah, I could see why people would ask me that. But it was just part of my journey. I hate that expression, my journey, but it truly was my journey as a musician, getting these opportunities. And I never really prepared or knew what was going to happen. I just tried to prepare personally for on the horn, whether it be on the clarinet or the saxes or the flutes or whatever. It's like, man, here's the highest level. Hubert Laws sounds like this, so I'm going to try to sound like that, as close to that as I can. Of course, it's impossible, but that was always my my how I thought about playing. Yeah.
Well, I really like this. Well, before I say that, I think it's really something special when you have a musician like yourself that is in service of the project, of the music, it seems, and I've heard you say this, that you are driven by the challenge of trying to serve the music in what is most appropriate, and to fulfill the vision of whoever's project it is, whether it's yours or somebody else's. And the same thing with the education aspect. I remember I ran into at the Gen Conference a couple years ago, and I remember you saying that what you get a thrill out of when one thing anyway when you're teaching is trying to diagnose the problem and then figure out how to fix it, and with the individual and what works best for them. And what I was going to say, this quote I love that you said, "I never waited for my teacher to tell me what to practice."
Yeah. There's the idea of playing music and trying to, especially, the jazz mind, right? It's got to be self-driven. It's got to be self-taught. There's, the most important things about music, especially in trying to learn jazz cannot be taught. Actually, you have to teach yourself because there's stuff that can't be, you know, quantified in a curriculum, right? And their ear hears something, and then you have to figure that sound out. The way someone gets into a note, you can't explain that, right? It's like, you know, it's like, you know, it's if you have a my reed sucks. All right, so you know, so that's what's that? Well, it's kind of dextery, right? Well, that's 20% lip, it's 23% air. It's like it. There's a lot going on to make that sound to sound like that, I should say, and it's you gotta figure it out. You gotta suck. You gotta no. That's too loose. So just by going after one little thing teaches you everything you need to know about that feeling, right? About how much pressure to use here. So the sound, if you're really listening accurately and doing that A/B objective comparison to what you're going for, it'll teach you what to do. So school, of course, is great. There's a lot of great things about going to school, but as far as like teaching them what you need, it's ultimately self-taught. And yeah, I think that's what I meant by that. You know, you just have to listen and actually echo it or copy it in as close as you can, and then your ear, if you're really being honest with yourself, then you're going to learn something, you know. And that's how I learned, you know. I think that's how all great jazz musicians learn, you know, is by this detail of their ear comparing themselves to what they're going for, right? And then of course you'll learn that, and you're gonna use that in your own way, you know. You know, there's this great fear of some students that come in and say, I don't want to copy that guy. I don't want to sound like him. I don't want to sound like that. I want to sound like, yeah, well, that's right. That you don't want to sound like them, right? That's the ethos of the jazz. It's like you want to sound like yourself. But to be able to sound like yourself, you have to sound like these people that inspire you well, how do they do that? How do they do that? Curiosity is the main thing about learning jazz, right? It's not taught by someone else. Things can be taught by other people, but you have to go after what you hear that, wow, what's that? What is that? How does he do that? Man, maybe I'll write that down. Maybe I'll figure it out. You know, that's the kind of autodidactic mindset, right? That jazz musicians have, period. They all do. Even if they don't realize that, they all do. And I think you would relate to that, right?
Yeah, and definitely. I feel like, yeah, I've spent hours and hours from an early age just playing with the recordings and trying to get as close as I can to that sound. And I feel like one of the things that I notice that is kind of holding people back as far as kind of getting closer to where they want to be when it comes to the saxophone is just the amount of time they spend on a specific thing is far less than is required, really, to get inside it and to really make serious progress. It seems like there's a lot of quantity happening instead of the quality of just really sitting with something for a long time. I'll even I don't know. I'm a little extreme, but sometimes I'll literally listen to only one song for an entire year, and that's a little extreme. But that's an example of just really trying to get inside there as
But
best
you're
as you
right.
can.
You're right, because we didn't have access by 2 clicks of a mouse. No
Hmm.
one did. They had records. You had to put the needle in the right spot to get a lick, you know, and or a tape machine that you'd slow it down to half speed. I did a lot of that at one point, but right, it was like, so when you heard something that, man, on the radio, or man, I'm gonna go get that record, right? And you'd have to save up and get those records to go to maybe bring home 3 or 4 records, but you lived with those records. You learned the record, right? And you hung out with your friends and talked about the record, and man, let's listen to that. What is that? But the idea of embedding that in your ear and then trying to do it is, to me, that's so it's the inspiration, right? Without the inspiration, why do any of it, really? But without the inspiration, well, it's all there. It's endless, infinite stuff to go after. And you can't learn everything, but you can learn through it. It's the same as a baby learning French, a Chinese baby learning French in Paris, right? Bring a 6-year-old baby to Paris from Beijing, and in a few months that baby's speaking French, right? It's relating the sounds that their parents are hearing to the object, to the action, right? It's the same thing, So when you hear something, you try to copy it, and then, but not just copy it. You have to kind of like, then what is it? You got to. That's the beautiful thing about jazz. You got to kind of, well, I could play that, but what is that? What sound is that? So that's the thing that's really fascinating about jazz, is like, how does it relate to the harmony, right? And saxophone players have a hard time with that at the beginning, because they think it's all on the saxophone, but the notes have to be related to the harmony, and that's really the fun part, right? It's like, what is that note in the harmony? What is that doing? So then you could replicate that in another tune, in another place that happens. So that becomes the real fun challenge of taking an idea that you transcribed, write it down. I told you I had, like,
Yeah, let's see those note cards.
yeah, this is over, God, 15 years probably or more. But I have piles of. There was this place where you could get these little notepads, and a student would come in, or so I hear something, that was intriguing, or I have a Bob Minster. This is now, it's probably almost a year and a half now, but we're playing together, and he played this thing. What was that? And he tried to, well, I don't know, what was that? And he played this lick that was basically a diminished pattern, but it had a major, anyway, without getting into the weeds on it. I liked it. The point is, I heard something, and my ear went, wow, what was that? That was nice. And then I went, oh, Bob, what was that, man? It was really nice. And then he played it. Oh, okay. And then I wouldn't remember it, right? So then I wrote it down on my notepad, so I could come back to it every day. Anytime I picked a horn, I would sort of like try to get that under my fingers. And it took some weeks to get that under my fingers, but that was a new piece of vocabulary. And that's something that jazz musicians do, whether they know it or not. Most people do know that, and you could be systematic about it. Some people are, left brain, right brain, but other people just hear it and try to get close to it, and it's really very beautiful. The the way this music is passed down, and it's how it's shared and how it's processed. And I think that's the most fun thing about learning jazz, is because it never ends, right? It's the process. It's all about the process, right? And then when you get a chance to actually play it and going, oh man, that's the carrot's there, and you have to try to do it, and you have to fail a lot. You have to fail at doing it, and then failing is the most important part of it, actually, because by failing you realize, oh, now I need to practice it more, or you just get, oh, it's okay to fail. It still worked. Just wasn't exactly the way I was wanted to play it. All that, trial and error, and finding the information, and trial and error, and is part of the whole thing. But the judgment is really the hardest thing, and the personal judgment, is the hardest thing to overcome. I've found over my years and years of teaching, and my own experience with judging myself, and that's a whole topic for another time. But that is a huge thing that holds people back, or that not only holds people back, but it is scares people away from it. It's quite judgmental on many levels, and that's a very interesting part of like trying to do something well, because you have to have objective criteria that you're going for, or else you won't get better. On the other hand, you can't punish yourself because you're not as good as that guy down the hall that's playing these badass licks that you think you have to play like that, or play like Mike Brecker, and like I got to play that. There's all self-imposed judgment that it's really hard to. That's part of all this, by the way, and that's a cool topic, because now I think I have a PhD in it, actually.
Yeah, that's navigating that world is never ending. But in my own experience, it definitely gets a little easier once you realize that the result is not the most important thing all the time, and it is that process, so that it just starts to build upon itself. And I found that just more recently, the more positive I am in the practice room, the faster I learn something. So it doesn't serve me well to really get negative. No, I definitely want to get the whatever it is correct, and be very accurate, whatever that might be. But yeah, it just takes longer when I get really down about it. But
that's everyone's the thing about that is very personal, and it has to do with how you grew up, right? Because it relates to how you think about yourself based on past experience. And believe me, now, if I knew any of this stuff when I was younger, I would love it. There's so much that I know now. I wish I knew when I was young. It would have saved me a lot of just personal anguish, I guess. But how one learns is very interesting to me. That's always been the teaching part of it. Is the for me the challenge is figuring out how to teach someone what they need, right? And you cannot. No one learns the same way, and that's big problem with curriculum and course study, right? Especially something so personal and so creative, the mindset of jazz. There's no one way to get at it, and that's very intriguing, right? It's like, and that's very helpful to know that you know, doesn't have to be any, like that guy that you hear down the end of the hall is playing all this badass shit, and I can't do that, right? And it doesn't have to be that kind of, well, you might, there's a process of realizing that what you love about learning, right? And what it takes to know what you need to learn, right? So people don't know what they need to learn. If you can't produce a sound well, right? There's a mechanical and physical thing that's going on with any instrument of having to execute and tame the beast of any instrument. So that's got to happen, right? Like you have to be able to control the instrument, right? And then there's this creative part, right? Which is the fun part. It's all fun to me, but they are. If you can't control the instrument, you're not going to be able to create on it, right? You're going to, develop habits, and you're going to, just hold yourself back. So both things happening at the same time. So some, as you know, because you're a teacher as well, so when someone comes in and they want to learn how to play these, these train licks, right? But they can't execute like at a very minimal level of that you need to play the horn. That's not going to happen, right? That's not going to happen, period. But that's what they want, but they don't realize they can't execute and be able to do that without getting the basic fundamentals together, right? So that's an interesting thing, because some people, they're more. I just want to play. I just want to play the music and be free and play it, right? And I get it. And then there's the other kind of people that are just stuck in trying to play their, all the whatever patterns and all the scales and all that stuff, and they don't use their ear to try to apply it. So that trying to figure out how they learn, where they are is my I think if I've that's the thing that I do well as a teacher, is try to figure out like what somebody needs, and then try to surround that, not giving up the other stuff that you want to do, but try to figure, okay, well, let's see what we can do to get this other thing happening, so that will help that, or vice versa, right? And that's a challenge, but I really enjoy that, and it's I think I use it as I don't have any teaching methodology really, I don't have like pedagogy. Some people really do, and I totally respect that, and but I have a lot of information that I've gained along the way by asking questions and like hearing people play, and then wow, that's amazing. And looking at how they play, like visually, I learn a lot visually, so I could then try it out, right? You got to experiment and suck. You got to really sound bad, and don't be afraid to try things to figure out what it is that is. Again, it's the A/B comparison of what you're sounding to what you're going for, right? But you can never lose track of that, or else you live in your own head about who you think you are, what you think you sound like, right? So,
yeah, that's exactly what happened when I came in for that lesson. I think we played a blues, and you said, well, you've got some technique things, and then you're like, but let me put on this record. Can you play this back for me? And you said, grab whatever you can and just try to play it back for me. And man, I struggled. And
I remember because you had amazing chops.
Mm-hmm.
you're a serious practicer,
Yeah. Yeah.
way more than I am. You know, I think you really enjoy the whole uh, determining what you're going to practice and then really shedding it so it's really fast and clean, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, you're one of those guys. I don't know how to characterize that. What is that, left brain or right brain? I don't know. I can't remember. I can, you know,
Yeah.
but you were so fluid on the horn, right? I remember that, man. I go, wow. But then when it came down to using that stuff, you were not sure
Hmm.
how to use it. Letting your ears like, well, is this sounding like it fitting in or not? So you're actually, yeah, that's a very cool. So you're thinking about your own process with me in terms of me hearing what you need, that you already have this, but I think you need this,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. That's exactly what happened. And
Hmm.
we, it was I think it was another blues, but you just put it on a random track, and you were just like, okay, let's just figure out what key it's in, and then it was in our G minor, I still remember, and then you were like, okay, let's just like, here's a phrase, and then you would play it with the recording if I couldn't figure it out, and we would go back and forth for a while, and yeah, I just remember ever since then, um, now that is something that I do when I'm not, shedding all the real technical aspects. Basically, for all of my resting time when I'm practicing, it's me just putting on a random YouTube video or whatever it is, and just like, okay, let me just get something off of this. What can I? Oh, that was cool. Let me try and grab that. And it was from that lesson, and that's still something that I do, every day. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, and that's really, really helped me. And then also for me personally, just writing out a lot of things, like composing etudes and things like that. I realized a couple years ago that I would write out these lines, and I'd really be thoughtful about what I was writing, and I'd correct things, and then I would play it, and I was like, oh, that sounds really nice. And then I just said to myself, why don't I play like that? Like, what's stopping me from playing like what I've written out here, in terms of like, I'm developing melodies, and I'm, taking things through sequencers or things, it makes sense developmental wise in the solo, rather than just kind of one chord, next chord, so forth. It had an arc and all this because I was really thoughtful with it, and that totally changed the way I started thinking about it. And then I would be listening, of course, to my favorite players and hearing much more of that, and so it kind of started to trigger, a different approach to the music. But yeah, for me, the practicing is a meditation type thing. It's what keeps me
Hmm.
centered. It's I get up super early. I'll practice at 5 a.m. I start practicing usually, and I get 7 hours in before lunch, and then I do the
Wow.
rest of the stuff that I have to do. Teaching and administrative stuff, and then I do a lot of
I'm
driving.
tired. I'm
Yeah,
tired just
but it was really that lesson that
oh, huh.
that sent me into a more creative and ear based direction, and that triggered a whole bunch of other things, in singing
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
all my arpeggios and
Wow.
all of this stuff, that and then playing in tune, that obviously is all connected with that.
Yeah,
um
but learning how to play in tune, is playing along with other people,
yep. Yeah.
playing along with the music. So basically, simplifying all that, it's like, what we're trying to do now in reverse engineering the process that was a natural process. Really was. One of the reason, if I would attribute any one thing for my ability to hear, was playing along with the TV set.
Hmm.
playing along with the stereo, playing along with everything. I grew up in a household that was pretty dysfunctional, and my sister was 10 years older. She left the house, but my mom and dad, they were bickering all the time, but the one thing that was a constant was the television was literally at our dining table on all the time. And when I grew up, it was jazz, big band jazz, jingles, background, underscoring for sitcoms. It was all jazz, right? And there was music coming out of the TV, and I couldn't stand their bickering, so I would always have my clarinet, a horn. Somehow I was able to get away with it. I just heard it play, just match everything, right? I was using the TV to play along with and to match it. Try to find the notes, try to find the melody. Am I in tune? Am I not in tune? If there's a record on, the radio is on, the same thing. Try to match it, right? That is not happening now. Hardly enough, right? That should be part of anyone's practice is to play along with music. What does that mean now? Well, we all got this screen in front of us with 2 clicks of a mouse. You got music. It doesn't have to be jazz. It could be anything. Play along with music because that's the ear training. The closer you could match the note, match the sound, it's all ear training, right? And it's literally 2 clicks of a mouse. And if you're waiting for this to happen in a college course, never going to happen, right? You have to simulate the environment of actually what happened, how Bird, and how Sonny, how everybody learned how to play. It's like they heard that, so I'm going to simulate that, right? It was more like everyone was playing all the time, and there was music on the radio, and you were just, everyone's waiting for the right course and the right lesson to figure out what do I need? What do I need? What do I have to practice? Well, it's just pick up your horn and play along with the music. And I feel really kind of stupid, saying this because it's stating the obvious, but it really needs to be stated, right? Just to pick up your horn and play a tune. How many tunes are in anyone's head given to 10, 20, 50, 100 tunes are in your head, in your ear. They're from nursery rhymes to church hymns to there's music in your head. Play it. Say, oh, I'm going to play Happy Birthday. Oh, how many people in a clinic okay, let's play Happy Birthday. Let's go. Everyone knows Happy Birthday. You'd be surprised how many people can't play it. They have to. It's okay. Let's get that out. Okay, there you go. You got it. Now make it swing. There we go. Now it's starting to feel better. Let's play it in a half step above. Play it a half step above. Get comfortable with that. Right? It's all self-generated practice that people don't realize that it's waiting for you by picking up your horn and not worrying about you have to do this, and this. That other stuff's great. You got to do that too. But the fun part is trying to relate the sound, your ear, to the music, right? And that's what jazz is, right? Totally, right? Playing a melody and making it sound pretty, embellishing that melody, and playing other melodies into the melody. That's jazz. Period. Simple. But now it's been turned around and been dissected into, well, this got to be able to do this, and this. You think, nope, nobody knew any of that stuff, right? No, forget it. That's what I try to, the main thing I try to do with teaching is to get the this process, this idea of having really, literally having fun on your instrument by playing along and copying, right? And not being judgmental, because you will fail. Am I sharp or am I flat? Am I out of time? It doesn't matter. You gotta just try until it gets faster, right? And that's kind of happened when I was pretty young, and as you get older, this becomes a little bit more difficult. I relate it to, if you wanted to learn how to surf, right, and you're 20 years old, it's harder to learn how to surf. You haven't been doing it for 8 years and falling off the surfboard and learning, or skateboarding or whatever. It's like everything becomes a little bit more difficult when you get older, but you can do it, and I don't know, I hope this is helpful. This is kind of like my general point of view in terms of how people are thinking it has to be this, 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 and this to get to here, right? And it doesn't have to be any of it. And if you have, I always wanted to be a fly on the wall of like 10, 20 great players and just watch how they practice. And I guarantee you, if 10 great players, they would all be playing different stuff, practicing different stuff. And that's a beautiful thing about jazz.
Yeah, and yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And having that fun be a part of the practice to keep you motivated and to practice the stuff that inspires you. Because I feel like we kind of get caught up into this, like you should be able to, play like this person and this person, this person, and this person, or you should start at the beginning. And it's like, well, that maybe at the time doesn't grab you. And it's like, now you're kind of like taking the fun out of what inspired you originally. And it might turn you off of becoming a musician in general, or just the player that you want to be. And I love that. I love that your practice strategy is based in finding what motivates you and keeps you inspired.
Yes, I when I have a student that comes in and or I do a clinic, say, what do you, how do you practice? What do you do when you pick up the horn? Well, I play long tones. Okay. Well, how do you play long tones? And then they play that. Right, with a tight embouchure, and do you like that? Does that motivate you? Do you like doing that? I said, not really. No. Is it helping you? Not really. Well, somebody told them that's what they're supposed to do. Well, long tones can be very beneficial, but if you're producing with the right embouchure, etc., right? If you're practicing long tones with a tight ass embouchure and your sound is like a kazoo, it's not helping. It's actually hurting you, right? So these ideologies that are passed down by I would say academic sort of mindset, not beneficial at all. I'm in direct conflict with classical saxophone teachers. Not to say I don't love classical saxophone, and it's beautiful, but the idea of there's a orthodoxy that is passed down to players that actually teaches them the wrong way to produce a sound that they could use in most other circumstances. So that being said, the idea of picking up the horn for me, and the idea of playing a tune first, just you picking up an instrument, play a tune, just imagine yourself on stage, and you're performing, right? You're projecting yourself on stage, and you're playing, and you're like people are listening, and you're trying to keep the time together, and the feeling of it. That's great practice, right? And you're just okay. I can play the horn. I'm going to just play a tune, right? And have a tune list, have repertoire that of tunes that that you would call on a jam session if you walk in. It's like, I'm going to play that, whatever. Just have fun. That's the fun part, right? So you want to get to the fun part, right away, right? Not this boring regiment stuff. Not to say you shouldn't do it, but to me that's motive. While you're playing that tune, you're going to fail at stuff that you want to do, and you might go, I don't know what I was doing there. That might become the practice, right? You might just go zoop, right? The spotlight goes to that. What was that? And you stop playing, and then that could be the practice. You're by playing, you're doing stuff that I don't like that. You're determining what to practice by failing, basically, or whatever you want to call it. It's like by that's one thing that I do is just try to play, right? The other thing, I don't know about you, but I'll pick up the horn, not with any intent at all. I'll just pick up the horn and see what happens, right? What did I do there? I wasn't thinking to play that, but so what I noticed a long time ago, I'll play something. I don't, without any thought, right? Say it's 3 notes, right? But immediately I will go, right? So now I'm trying to just take those 3 notes and move it around the horn. I wonder why I did that. It's intervals, right? And the intervals are feeling. So if you're going to be a jazz player, you need to move intervals around the horn freely, right? Seems to me, because all music is intervals, right? When we practice scales, we practice arpeggios, all that, and very important, but they're intervals. What's an arpeggio made out of? Thirds. So you could say, okay, this week I'm gonna play minor thirds. You write it down, right? What's a minor third? There's a minor third. So what, right? Right? To be able to play a minor third, that could be something that you work, a practice thing, and just an interval, right? To be able to move that interval smoothly over the range of the horn. If you could do that fast and clean, you'll realize that everything else gets better. By doing one thing so good and clean in this sort of a Zen way, everything gets better because now you're really doing the practice that you need, because we all need this kind of detailed practice of figuring out how to move around the horn smoothly with time, right? And all these things are part of practicing, but they're big. Like, I'm going to play this thing, but it's actually, you could break it down into small things. Well, there's all intervals, right? So if you can move intervals around, and it becomes a math exercise, right? So if you're gonna, so that's just chromatic minor thirds, right? Well, then you go, when you could do that smoothly, then you go, what else can I do with that? Well, the first thing that I think of is reversing it. I'm practicing in front of you. So this. So I'm practicing in front of you now, right? So this minor third now is becoming just I would call it connecting material, right? I've heard you play this a lick like that, right? So you get this. You want to put the metronome on and play it. You're really getting, over the course of days, you're getting this minor third really under your neuromuscular body. Your body is sort of like feeling it. There's a feeling to it, right? There's also a feeling of like where to put your tongue if you want to enter your tongue, because time is about your tongue and your finger coordination for the most part, right? So do. So that tongue becomes the swing, right? So what else can you do with a minor third? Oh, you could add another. How about that? It could half step down, 2 minor thirds. Wow. So I did this so it'll come back fast, right? So now I got another way to play minor thirds. And once you get the minor third, then you can add an interval to it. How about I just added a fourth to it, right? That becomes another feeling, a grip, as you will say. And so these are the kind of things that are intriguing to jazz players, right? And it's really, certain jazz players it's more apparent that they like this stuff, like Joe Henderson, right? Mike Brecker, you could almost like hear how clear these geometric ideas are within the course of a tune. No, the hard thing is, well, okay, so what? What do you do with that? Well, that's a good question, because now you got this thing under your fingers. Now you got to use it in a tune, right? Oh, how do you do that? Well, you play it on a tune that's like a 1-chord funk tune, right? Mm-hmm. 1-chord tune, blues, something easy. You're just going to insert it, So if you go,
oh, Bob.
Right?
You want to
there's
do
no
that?
Rhyme or reason to it.
You want to do that one more time for us and just turn the mic down just a little bit. I know we had turned it up. I mean,
so the practicing this is kind of like stuff that I never know. This stuff is not taught. I had to teach myself. Well, what is it that I like? What is it that I do that got me better, right? And we're talking about teaching now, right? That's ultimately what I've done. And then when I have students, I go, well, how do I teach? What did I do to learn this stuff? That's one little kind of tiny thing that I might have done, but how did I learn how to do that, right? And that's really the teaching process to me. It's like, well, I'm not sure how that is. Like, how did I think about that? How did I practice that? And then I try to encapsulate that somehow and figure it out, because I don't know until I think about it, right? How I learned something, right? And that's the fun part for me.
Yeah. We'll turn your mic back up if you're just talking. It was just the playing part. It sounded great for the talking.
Oh man, sorry.
No problem.
I could get this a little bit like that.
Okay. I can't let you go without talking about your setup and your gear. I know that you're, super knowledgeable about all things saxophone related. So tell us what you're playing on now. Is it something that you've been playing on for an extended period of time or something new?
This stubby Dukov is a mouthpiece I've been playing on for quite some time. Uh, as you can see, I have a lot of stuff, but it's only because I'm interested in it. I'm sort of it's fun for me to figure out the this very, very complex chain of events that happen from here to here to here to here, right? And there's so much going on there that that now I know more about it than ever. But it's always been kind of a, you know, have mouthpieces laying around and thinking that they're just junk or whatever. And another horn or neck would come through, and I'd pick something up and then put it on another neck, and went, oh, wow, that feels good. That was always the question. I said, well, I thought that mouthpiece wasn't very good, but it's good on this neck, right? And so all those questions are something that is part of my, I suppose, a little bit of a passion now, like of trying to figure out what it all is, because there's a lot of mythology, or whatever, wives' tales, all the stuff that I embrace most of my life about what it is, and it's those serial numbers, that's the serial number you have to find, and this guy plays that, so you got to get that, and all these kind of I guess you would say urban legend stuff, and kind of information that's passed down from teacher to player, there's a lot of stuff like that that's kind of fun, but it's basically, most of it's based in nothing. It's just there's nothing about it that really is I would say that it's quantifiable, or it's really fun for me to kind of help people with their equipment. Let's just put it that way, because I've the idea of getting your sound is, what is that about? Like, that's like what we were talking about. You program your ear based on what you love, the inspiration from records, and certainly from guys that I've heard live, and what hits you, like, wow, that's a great sound. How does he get that great sound? Again, curiosity, right? What's he playing on? What's that setup? What's that feel like? So my whole life I've been asking players that have great sound, like, hey, can I try your setup? I want to see what that feels like, right? And from that standpoint of curiosity, I think I've learned a lot about what actually is the creating the sound comes from here. Your sound is here, but then along the way, that gets really complicated and convoluted, and there's a lot of dumb stuff going on with mouthpieces and equipment, and just without getting into all the particulars, because it's something that I really love to talk about, and it's really fun for someone to come in here and they're having problems with their just getting the notes out of the horn, right? Just like it's in tune, not being able to play the lower register because they're playing a reed that's too hard for the facing. out of tune because the reed's too hard and they're clamping down, so it's pushing the pitch up, and then they get used to that feeling because they like the sound of what the resistance creates, but they're creating another problem by doing that. And so there's all the stuff going on with the saxophone that's very unique to the saxophone because, basically a classical approach on the trumpet or the trombone, the basic way the sound is produced, that approach works, producing the sound, right? But on the saxophone, it's all up for grabs, right? Because you can pick up this horn and put a reed on a mouthpiece, and basically get a sound, and then what, right? And who's to say, right, what's good or bad? It's kind of the beauty. It is the beauty, actually, of why we love jazz saxophone, because it's so personal, and people are able to get their own sound, even if you would say, and it's not a conventional way. It could be like totally wrong in a kind of a way it's not the most efficient or way to produce a sound, but because it's jazz and because it's the saxophone, we're going, okay, that's really unique, that's cool, but that may work for that person like a Jackson Pollock painting, you're right, but if you want to actually play music with other people and work as a musician, that means different capacities of being a musician. That means playing in tune. That means blending with other players. That means be able to sit in a section and be able to do that. Then that requires a different criteria.
Yeah, I remember being at one of your gigs not too long ago, and I remember seeing you trying different mouthpieces and different songs, and then I asked you at the break, and I was like, "Oh, what are you going on?" And I was like, and you said, "Oh, that was my first time playing that mouthpiece. I'd never played it before, and I'm just trying to figure out how to play it, correctly and all that." And I thought that was, brave. But
I wouldn't recommend that.
but also really speaks towards your approach to the curiosity and trying to whatever it takes to get better and to get closer to what it is that you feel is best and appropriate for you and what sounds good. And that's always really inspiring. I do have to ask you, just popped into my head. I remember seeing a video of you and Mike Brecker trying out equipment in like Japan, I want to say. Does that sound right?
Yeah, probably at Ishimori's. Yeah.
Yeah. What was that? What was that like? I mean,
well, hanging out with Mike Brecker for me was quite, special, of course, and being able to, just to talk and hang out as friends, but to hear him play, hear anybody that's so great at what they do, it's very inspiring, because I was always a Mike Brecker fan, of course, and but his trying equipment was very interesting because he was very aware of his sound and the what he needed for his personal feeling of what he needed, as far as he later on he realized that the sound he wanted was probably not able to get, because he used to play a more resistant setup and work very hard, and then he had a problem later on where he had to go to an easier setup. So he knew what that feeling he needed, and he had a neck on that was very free blowing, and his setup changed because he needed to have a free blowing setup. Just the most amazing sound I've ever heard come out of a horn. But so he was playing a bunch of different horns at Ishimori's, and there were a couple that were just like, whoa. We all went, Mike, that's I like that one. And he goes, yeah, I know. But it was too resistant. So he always went back to what he knew that was going to work for him. But it's an interesting thing in itself, is because the resistance and the lack of resistance, free blowing creates a more of a simpler sound. More resistance creates more harmonics and stuff going on. So like the balance of sound and what we like to hear is about this balance of resistance, right? If you need to have immediate, easy, really free blowing, and that's what you need, that's going to produce different harmonics on the horn. And opposite, like if you could think of Joe Lovano, right? Joe Lovano plays a very resistant setup. I played his setup years ago, and I would be dead in about 5 minutes trying to play that horn. It took so much energy just to get to read the vibrate. But what was the sound that produces, like all this width and harmonics fur, and not a lot of point, but a lot of thickness and width, right? And the opposite, if you will, with Mike Brecker, played this Gardella mouthpiece with a free blow, and that amazing, beautiful sound, but it had this real centered sort of vibrant sound. It's kind of interesting to hear, to see what guys play in terms of that, right? What the equipment produces in terms of efficiency and as opposed to lack of efficiency, right? So the body itself and your willingness or ability to put up with working harder to produce that effect is the question, it seems, right? I can't do that. I just can't I just don't have that much strength or an energy, and I can't articulate as fast, right? And that produces another sense of articulation. So we're talking about a very interesting topic here that I've thought a lot about because of all this interest I have in equipment and how things work together, and this air going through a mouthpiece and over a baffle and having to produce a reed vibration, right? That then goes into a neck and then goes into the horn. The horn itself is more or less just the amplifier, right? And there's differences, obviously, but the most of it's here, right? That's you're buying the neck, and how your mouthpiece feels on that neck, right? So I like this horn, right? So this is a whole area of interest that I've had over the years now, that I think that I actually know how to help people with their setups. And a lot of people have necks that are not good. They've either came with the horn and that's the way they are, or they've been compromised. They've been bent up and down over the years, and all the stuff was kind of realized over time, just because I always tried the guy's stuff. Man, let me try your horn, man. Listen, oh man, this is a great horn. Take the neck off and put it on my horn. It's like, oh, it feels the same. Oh, it's the neck. Those kind of experiences are part of my background of like just being around a lot of players that I was able to try their stuff. And I was always asking, hey man, let me try what you play. I hanging out here years ago with Walter Smith, and just ridiculous, beautiful sound. And man, Walter, can I play your setup? And I was like, what? How are you playing this? And he goes, I know, man. That's like, he learned how to play a neck that was bent down and very out of tune for me. It was, but he learned how to play it in tune, and it created this thing. So, like, who am I? Who am I to say that that's not good, a good setup? But that's kind of an outlier, right? There's a guy with so much talent that's just painting, right? And learned how to use the tools that he had to make that sound, and that's pretty cool, right? Because the imagination and the talent overrides everything, right? And there's all kinds of analogies that you can make. If you're a great heart surgeon and you're out in the middle of the woods and you have an X-Acto knife, you will be able to save a life because you know what you're doing, right? But is it the ultimate way you want to do heart surgery? Probably not. So I like the idea of being able to get to what you need to get, and so you could have fun, not work so hard. And a lot of players are working really hard because they think that's the way to get their sound. And within a range, kind of true, because of the resistance and versus lack of resistance is what we're talking about. Is airflow. Is airflow from your body and through creating guys that want to play a link that don't know how to produce an embouchure here and create an internal baffle with their tongue, right? Cannot play a link. They can't do it. It sounds stuffy to them, right? And so there's all this stuff I've realized over the years. It's like, what are we talking about here? Like how players characterize what's good and bad is basically inaccurate, to say it nicely, right? There's a lot of bullshit, right, about what it is that produces sound, and who am I to say it? Because I can say this stuff now because I think I understand what I asked the same questions. I really didn't know, right? I didn't know what it is to produce a sound. And all I know is that the greatest players that I grew up hearing, that I learned a lot from, all studied with Joe Allard, right? And I know you had Gary Keller on, who was a purveyor of Joe's all of Joe's stuff, but if you talk to like 10 different Joe Allard students, they would have different ways to characterize it, right? But that is something that I think I've learned Joe Allard's approach by listening and asking questions and trying to distill it into my own way of explaining it, right? So that's something that's really fun and interesting, that knowledge, as far as when it comes to teaching, especially, and
Yeah, we definitely have to to get into that at some point. I before we go, I do want to say that that the point you made about getting the tongue up and forward and creating that internal baffle was huge for me. I remember hearing you talk about that, hiss like a cat and then move the tongue forward. And I played on an auto link for about 15 years, and I got a pretty bright sound. And I had a lot of people that would come up to me and say, "What kind of baffle do you have in that mouthpiece?" And there's no baffle, nothing in there. And it was all internally, and it was from that exact thing that you said that allowed me to get closer to the sound that I was looking for, and it was a much more focused sound. And yeah, as everybody knows,
well, the baffle, you're creating the baffle with your
right.
tongue. So how I just really simple and really quick. It's like playing sax. If I knew this again when I was younger, it's whistling, right? I can't whistle. What's going on when you whistle? Well, this is coming down away from the reed. But when you whistle high, what's happening? Your tongue's going high. When you're whistling low, your tongue's going low. Well, what's the deal there? Well, it's the same as water coming through from your house through a hose. Turn the water on. The water just flops out of the big hole, right? And then you put your thumb on the end of that hose, and the water goes 10 feet, right? So what is that? That's creating a smaller aperture. For the same amount of water is going through that smaller aperture, going faster, right? And then, so that's a beautiful correlation of what has to happen internally with our tongue. Ah, ah. Same thing, right? Ah. Right? And if you whistle, that's fast, cool air. You can't whistle today. Slower, warmer air, right? That's what happens. That needs to happen on the range of the horn. As you go higher, your tongue goes higher, faster air, and Gary had I was watching his thing, incredible, about the reed vibration, just the mouthpiece and the reed, right, producing all the notes, going from high to low. That's right, because the reed has to vibrate at the right frequency here, right? Now, if you're too tight, right, biting down here, you're not only are you you're stopping the very vibration that you need to play, right? The reed's everything. That produces your sound, right? So if you're biting, you're cutting off that reed vibration, and you get into kazoo land, right? So you need to let the reed vibrate freely, but what happens with that? It's like you go out of tune, right? So the octave key is not. Of course, this is the register key, but the register key is here, right? Because if you just play, I'm not changing anything, right? It's flat. That's the saxophone. That's what a saxophone does. Totally. Right? Right? So we hear that when we're young. We go, that's terrible. We got to do something to tune it up. Right? So what do we do? What did I do? You tighten up. Right? I tightened up. Brought the pitch up. But then what happened to the sound? It went into nasal land, right? Because as I tighten up, the reed is collapsing. The reed is not vibrating. So then you go, then I didn't know any of this stuff. This is all Joe Howard shit, right? He might not have explained it just like this, but you want to get a beautiful resonant. Well, you want to keep it resonant, but without tightening, you want to get, here's my tongue, right? So I'm trying to, I just lost my keyboard. I'm trying to minimize the firming. Of course there's firming. As you go up, there's got to be some firming. Here's the embouchure, right? Like from low to high, could be like that. Right? Right? But a lot of people are starting here, right? They're starting too tight, right? And that's where that mouthpiece exercise really demonstrates the frequency of the reed vibration of what needs to happen. Because if you need to play that, but if you're if you're vibrating, you've got the pressure that's a fourth above that for that C. It's too tight, right? So this flexibility needs to be practiced, and no one ever taught me this stuff, right? It was about like what, So it's very interesting stuff, man. And I love hearing a guy like Gary and others talk about this stuff because it's so not it, there's a real lack of understanding of what it is that needs to happen, right? And man, I tell you, I come across the most incredible players, and they're playing sharp all the time, right? They're both playing out of tune, and they've got into these habits of playing equipment that doesn't actually function, but they like the sound because it creates resistance. It creates complexity in the sound. But, playing a reed that's too hard for the facing creates, like, you need to bite, right? And you bite, and what happens to the pitch when you bite?
Go sharp.
Go sharp, right? So you learn, because you like the sound, you learn how to play sharp. Well, no. As you can see from my cup, you cannot play out of tune. That's one of the most basic things. As a musician, you need to learn how to play in tune. I'm sorry, it's unacceptable. No one wants to play with you if you're out of tune. Nobody, right? And you can play the badass shit, incredible stuff, and they go like, oh yeah, that guy plays out of tune. You don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be that guy. Yeah. So that's so much stuff.
Well, this has been incredible, Bob. So many things left to discover and talk about as well. I'd love to do it again. I mean, just a wealth of knowledge and so many different perspectives. As you said, you've taken a lot of time to figure out not only how to do it yourself, but how to teach it to others, and in an individualistic way, what speaks to each person. And that, of course, is a great trait of a great educator. And I know that it's changed my playing forever, and really, really inspired me along the way. So
thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
Yeah, well,
that makes me very happy to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah, really. Well, it's
nothing makes me happier to know that I could help somebody with their passion,
Well, and not only me, because I kid you not, every single student that I have, I am saying those exact things that I've learned from you. So it's helped a lot of people, definitely.
Thank you, man.
Well, with that, I think we'll call it. This has been incredible. Once again, Mr. Bob Sheppard, one of the most influential saxophonists out there, from any type of music, any genre. He does it, and of course, so many different instruments. And I forgot to mention, I was going to say that you actually played, I think, was it flute primarily on Brecker's Quindectet record? Wasn't that one of the...
It was basically mainly a flute, some soprano, but flute, alto flute, and soprano.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, Bob, thank you so much, and let's definitely do it again.
Thank you, Jeff, and I really appreciate it. And I'm easily, if people were interested in studying or critique, they could go to my website, and I'm glad to work that out.
Yeah, and I will put the any links that will be helpful for any viewer in the video description. All right.
All right, Jeff. Thank you, man.
Yeah. Thanks, Bob.
All right.
Okay.
See you soon. Come on over and hang. Let's play some tunes together.
Let's definitely do it.
Okay.
I'd love to do it.